Evening once again, my dear traveller. Egads, my dearest traveller, whatever you think you are doing. Quick, get back on the path. Get back on the path this instant, I beg of you. Oh, my dear traveller, I am so deeply sorry I spoke to you so harshly. But you see, I was overcome with concern for your safety. You see, fields are not always a safe place to walk, for you never quite know what lurks in them. What do I mean? Come, traveller. Come sit on this stile and have one of my sandwiches, whilst I tell you the tale I have chosen to call Scarecrow. Just before the Hackenbeck Tunnel on Thomas's branch line is Terence's field. Most days you'll see Terence chugging back and forth across the field, either ploughing, sowing or gathering in crops. Because the field is frequently used for crops, Farmer McColl had erected the Scarecrow in the corner of the field, but it had recently been taken down due to it falling into a state of disrepair. One bright and warm September morning, Terence was sleeping in his shed when the doors were opened by Jake, his driver.
Morning, Terence.
Good morning, Jake. All set for another day of ploughing, are we?
That we are, but first we have to go up to the main yard to pick up Farmer McColl's new Scarecrow. It just arrived this morning.
Did it really? That was quick. We only just took down old Boston yesterday.
And you got up for a bargain too. Chop was practically giving the thing away.
No doubt another poor soul having to cut his losses in order to pay back the bank.
I know, boy, but we can't help that. Come on, let's go get this Scarecrow and finish off that plowing. I hear there's a cold spell coming soon, and I want to get those seeds planted before it arrives.
Jake started Terence's engine, and they rode up the track towards the farmyard. When they arrived, Jake switched off Terence's engine and disappeared into one of the barns. He soon emerged, carrying a large straw figure.
Here we go, Terence. What do you think?
Terence didn't quite know what to think. The last Scarecrow had been a cheery-looking thing with a dopey smile, almost like the Scarecrow out of The Wizard of Oz. But this one looked nothing like that. It was much darker in colour, and its smile was less dopey and more sinister. Terence couldn't be sure, but he felt like the Scarecrow's stitched eyes were boring into his own, like a predator eyeing up its prey.
It's certainly different from the last one.
Yeah, I know it's not much to look at, but hey, if he unsettles us, it means he'll be a knockout with the crows. Come on, let's get him down to the field and set him up.
And so, Jake and Terence headed back down to the field, and Terence watched as Jake set up the Scarecrow before they set to work on the field. All throughout the day, Terence couldn't shake the feeling that the new Scarecrow was watching him. He was very relieved when it was time for him to go back into his shed.
Boy, am I tired. No, Terence. I think I'll just skip the pub and go straight on home. See you in the morning.
Not Jake.
The next morning, Terence woke bright and early, sighing as he felt the change developing in the wind.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Winter's coming. I reckon we best get those,
Terence got off as he noticed something was different about the Scarecrow. He couldn't be sure, but he was pretty certain that it had been looking to the left and had been put in a sort of waiting pose, but now it was facing forward with its arms at its sides. Just then, Jake approached.
Morning, Terence.
What? Oh, morning, Jake.
You alright, boy? You seemed miles away just then. Penny for them?
Oh, I was just wondering, is there something different about the Scarecrow?
Huh? Oh, I see what you're getting on. I shouldn't worry. Probably some stupid kids saw us putting up yesterday and decided to pull a trick on you. Anyway, enough talk. Farmer McColl wants us up at the yard. There's something urgent he wants to talk to us about.
Right, let's go.
With a roar of his engine, Terence trundled out of the field and up the track. When they got to the yard, he found Farmer McColl talking agitatedly to a constable.
Good morning, sirs.
Is it, Terence? Well, I certainly don't think so. Last night something large got in at the chickens. Those that weren't mauled the bitch shan't lay properly for a good few weeks. I'll be damned.
Oh, dear. Any idea what did it, Constable?
Judging from the devastation in the coop, my guess is some large breed of dog. It's more likely than a stray, but I'll make checks with all the owners of large dogs in the area to see if any got out.
Thank you, Constable. I'd be most appreciative.
And with that, the conversation ended. The constable got onto his motorbike and rode off. Farmer McColl went back into the farmhouse, and Terence and Jake went back into the field to start seeding. As they passed near to the Scarecrow, Terence was convinced he could see some strange-looking stains covering the hands and face, but assumed he was imagining things. Before he knew it, night was falling and he was being backed into his shed. It took him a while to drift off, but he eventually managed. The next morning, Terence was violently awoken by Jake throwing open the doors.
Jake, whatever's happening?
Can't talk, Terence. All I know is Miss McColl wants us up at the yard. Double quick, it's happened again.
As Terence sped out of his shed and up the track, he could have sworn that the Scarecrow had moved again during the night, but again assumed it was a silly trick being played by a couple of schoolboys who ought to know better. Up at the yard, he found Farmer McColl speaking with some fury to another police officer, this time a sergeant who was doing all he could to calm the irate farmer.
It's happened again, Terence. Only this time it's the pigs. For my best breeding stock utterly slaughtered. My only compensation is that I shall at least recoup some of the lost profit from the sale of the meat. And as for you, Sergeant, your constable reassured me he'd take some steps to ensure this wouldn't happen. But it has, hasn't it?
With respect to Mr. McColl, my constable did make it clear to you it was more likely than a stray, and that's what we seem to be facing. Not a single name on our register reported their dog having got out.
Well, they're either lying, or you're all just incompetent. Now, do I need to remind you that your superintendent is on the board of the local Rotary Club, as am I?
Mr. McColl, I don't take kindly to threats or insults. My officers are doing the very best they can, but you must understand we cannot be everywhere at once.
You're quite right, Sergeant. I apologize for my outburst. No doubt the stress of the situation is getting to me. Please, continue doing the best you can.
Don't worry, Mr. McColl. We'll do the best we can.
And with that, the sergeant headed back to his car, whilst Terence and Jake headed back to the field to do more sowing. Again, Terence felt a sense of unease as he looked at the Scarecrow.
That smile. It's almost as if he's enjoying all this.
Don't talk daft, Terence. It's a Scarecrow. Nothing but sock and straw. Honestly, anybody would think you were a character in one of those silly old monster movies I used to watch as a lad.
I don't know, Jake. I just can't shake this funny feeling I have.
Well, maybe this will do it. We're to head over to Wellsworth. Trevor's burst his safety valve and left the vicar with half a dozen felled trees littering the orchard.
You know something? Maybe you're right, Jake. If I'm away from that silly Scarecrow for a bit, maybe I'll lose the stupid notion I have of him being alive.
And so, Terence chugged his way towards Wellsworth and spent the day dragging logs here, there and everywhere. By the time they were done, it was too late to head home, so, at the offer of the vicar, Terence stayed the night in Trevor's shed, which pleased the traction engine a great deal. The next day, Terence returned to McColl Farm and was floored to see the yard full of police vehicles of all shapes and kinds. He noticed Farmer McColl talking to an inspector and trundled over.
Oh, sir, whatever's happened? It's not the cows this time, is it?
I'm afraid it's a bit more serious than livestock this time, Terence.
I'm not sure I follow, sir.
Early this morning, the Farquhar cross-country runners discovered the lifeless bodies of a couple of young men whilst they were running through the woods that border your field. One described it looking like the result of a bear attack, whilst another described it like a tribe of cannibals decided to throw a party using the youngsters' entries as decorations.
Are you saying work suspended until the police have finished their investigation then, sir?
Oh no, Jake, far from it. The inspector here says we can continue working in that field. We're just to refrain from entering the woods for the time being.
Alright, sir. Come on, Terence. You heard the boss.
Jake, you can't be serious. There's obviously something or someone out there.
And if there is, police will handle it, Terence. Besides, might take her mind off what's been happening recently.
If you say so, sir.
Terence returned to the field. Again, he shot the Scarecrow a filthy look, noting once again it was not in the position it had been the day before.
Again? I tell you, Terence. Once the bill catches whoever or whatever's been on that livestock and those two lads, they'll get around to finding out which little perishers are playing silly beggars with that flipping Scarecrow. I'm getting right cheesed off putting it back the way you first set up, only for them to muck around with it again.
Terence just kept quiet as he set to work in the field, always keeping an eye on the Scarecrow. He'd hoped his time away would have cured his silly paranoia that it was watching him and was somehow responsible for the disruption of late, but, if anything, his paranoia was growing stronger. It was affecting him so badly, it started to play havoc with his engine, causing it to splutter and grind until, eventually, he came to a shuddering stop. Jake tried turning it over and over and directed some very strong language, the type Terence had never heard him utter before, but eventually gave up.
It's no good. Your engine's hot and I haven't the time or tools handy to repair you. I'll just have to wait until tomorrow.
But that'll mean I'll be out in the cold all night. Can't you just push me into my shed? It's not far.
You must be joking. You weigh a blinking ton. Even with your brakes off, I try pushing you. You won't be the only thing I push.
And with that, Jake set off on foot up the path, leaving Terence sat in the middle of the field. Terence suddenly realised that he'd broken down facing the Scarecrow, which seemed to be staring at him as if it was finding the situation hilarious.
Stupid thing. I wish Blossom was here. Nothing like this happened until you came along. Father McColl ought to do the decent thing and buying another Scarecrow and throwing you on a bonfire.
Eventually, night fell and Terence fell asleep, but he woke later to a strange sound. It was a sort of shuffling sound, like someone in slippered feet were dragging their feet across a carpet. Terence cracked open an eye and looked around, but could see nothing in the dim light but the Scarecrow. Suddenly the Scarecrow shook, snapping Terence awake.
What the? Oh, hang on a minute. I think I see what's going on. I've caught you at last, haven't I? Now you stop messing with that Scarecrow and come forward, where I can get a better look at yourselves.
There was no response apart from the Scarecrow cocking its head as if observing and analysing the tractor. Terence slowly started to grow impatient and spoke a little louder.
You might be mucking about, but I'm certainly not by thunder. Just you do as I say and come forward.
As the moon slowly came out from behind a cloud, someone did come forward, but not a pair of mischievous boys. To Terence's stunned horror, the Scarecrow, seemingly totally unaided, flexed and tore itself free from its perch, landing on the ground in front of Terence. It slowly turned to face the tractor and gave him a smile, except instead of the regular stitched smile, he saw rows upon rows of sharp, jagged teeth. Terence couldn't be sure, but he was pretty certain he could see what he thought were traces of liver and intestines stuck in the gaps.
Mother of God!
The creature gave a rattling laugh and shuffled towards Terence, who, without Jake, could do nothing but sit still. He knew shouting for help would do no good, for by the time anyone from the farm heard him and made it down, this thing would surely do him in. He watched as the beast flicked its hands and produced long, sharp claws, which it raised above its head. Terence shut his eyes and prepared for the end. Suddenly, bright lights snapped on, and Terence opened his eyes again to see large black vehicles bouncing towards him from all sides. Overhead, large black helicopters that he swore weren't there previously, given he hadn't heard or seen them, hovered, shining bright spotlights down on the Scarecrow. As Terence watched, the large black vehicles came to a stop, doors flew open, and figures dressed in black armour leapt out of the rear. The soldiers, if that's what they could be called, for they certainly didn't look like any police officer Terence had seen before, surrounded the Scarecrow and aimed guns of all shapes and sizes at it.
Contact on entity.
Procedure Gabriel. Secure and contain. Repeat. Secure and contain.
Look out and show hostile attention!
Open fire. Shoot to incapacitate if you can.
Terence stared as the soldiers opened fire on the Scarecrow, which gave an inhuman shriek of fury. For every 2 steps forward it took, the bullets and grenades being pumped into it ensured it took 3 steps back. Terence had never heard such a noise before, what with all the shouting, howling, gunfire and explosions. Eventually, the creature gave one last mournful howl before collapsing to the floor.
Cease fire! Cease fire!
Terence watched as 2 of the soldiers approached the creature, weapons still aimed, whilst their colleagues covered them. One of the soldiers leaned in, poked the creature twice with the barrel of their rifle, then withdrew and faced the soldier who seemed to be in charge.
Entity confirmed is down.
Well, what are you waiting for? A written invitation? Get it tagged, bagged, and on the truck back to the compound ASAP. I want to be gone before the local plot turns up to find out what the noise is all about.
Yes, Sergeant.
Yes, Sergeant!
Terence continued to watch as figures in white overalls wrote something on a plastic tag and attached it to the creature before popping it in a large body bag, and watching as the soldiers in black lifted it up and slid it into the back of one of the black lorries. He was so occupied with what was going on, it took him a while to notice a young man in a black suit was looking at him.
Sir, sentient civilian agricultural machine over here.
Thank you, Lieutenant. I'll deal with this. Good evening, sir. I expect this has all been a bit of a shock for you, and that you no doubt have questions you'd like answered.
Yes, I do. Who are you people, and what was that thing?
Those are very good questions, and will be answered in good time. But first, I'd just like you to take a look at this.
Terence!
Huh? Oh, morning, Jake.
Blimey, you should sleep out here under the stars more often. You were sleeping like a baby.
Yes, I must have been. And I didn't have a strange dream.
Oh? What was it about?
Well, you'll probably laugh, but I dreamt the Scarecrow was actually some kind of creature and it were about to kill me, when these people dressed in all black suddenly came along and shot at it with a load of guns.
Wow, that does sound like a strange dream. Anyways, I best fix your engine. Huh. Well, I'll be damned.
Nothing serious, is it?
Actually, I can't find anything wrong with your engine, yet I definitely remember it breaking down.
Maybe you dreamt that last night?
Yeah, maybe I did. Anyway, as your engine seems to be working order, let's get this field done.
Jake climbed on board and started the engine. Terence looked around and suddenly noticed that the Scarecrow had been replaced by another cheerier-looking one, much in the style of Old Blossom.
Hey, what happened to the old Scarecrow?
What? Have you seriously forgotten already? You scrapped Old Blossom and got that one.
But there was one before that one. It was made entirely out of dark sacking and had this almost sinister grin on its face.
Terence, we've never had a Scarecrow of that description. And if it's as ghastly as you say it is, I dare say we never will.
Okay, so you can't remember the Scarecrow, but what about the recent deaths like the chickens, the pigs, and those boys?
Oh, at least find out they were just a result of a pack of feral dogs.
What? Are you sure?
Yeah, I was there when the couple told Mr. McColl.
Terence didn't believe it at first, but after he spoke to Joey and saw the proof for himself, he accepted it as fact. But even then, he didn't fully believe it. He still relives that night in his dreams, and is convinced everything was real, and that his dream is, in fact, a repressed memory. Terence decided not to ask anybody about the strange figures in black. He is still convinced they were not the police, and has recently come to the opinion they weren't even the military, despite how they dressed and acted. No, he is convinced himself this group of people dressed all in black and grey are, in fact, a secret paramilitary organisation tasked with tracking down and eliminating otherworldly creatures like the thing that posed as something as seemingly harmless as an ordinary scarecrow. But, of course, he doesn't tell anyone, for he knows that the people in black, this unit, are out there and could be watching his every move. Well, traveller, perhaps you might now see why I was so insistent that you did not stray from the path. What's that? Do I know of this strange organisation called UNIT? Whatever makes you think I do? Ah, well, maybe I do know them, and then maybe I don't. You can never tell when it comes to me, traveller. Ah, the clock doth toll the hour, and summons me back to my work. Walk on with hope in your heart, dear traveller, but remember my warning. Stick to the path when walking through a field, especially as I think I might have just seen that scarecrow over there move ever so slightly.